movement and stuff. So I definitely struck my head, but somehow like, yeah,
Oh,
just wasn't, no, I mean, I'm going to chiropractor and stuff, like my back is all out of whack, but I'm not broken back there at least.
So was it a nice,
That's
nice
good.
exotic place you did this, or was it home?
It was on vacation, yeah, and we were actually in Vermont.
Oh, you're in Vermont.
Yeah. So day one of vacation.
Hi.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So you had a nice relaxing, where you can
Very relaxing. Yeah. Yeah, we were not. I was kind of booking.
I do not have anybody on there. Okay, sound is going on, everyone.
Everybody's got their masks on.
5 o'clock flight. How do I turn? Okay. I think it's on.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Today being Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th, I would like to bring this meeting of the Energy and Environmental Committee to order. I am Mavis Spades. I will take my mask off when I'm speaking, if that's okay. Is that the rule? I don't know. Okay.
6 feet.
Okay.
Oh, that is you.
Sorry. Call to order, please.
Wojnicki,
Present.
Allen,
Allen, present. Good morning.
Caius,
Caius present.
Molina,
Molina present.
Strathman,
Strathman, present.
Wallace, Pirog, Shepro, Bates.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from July 16th, 2021? Caius moves.
Wojnicki seconds.
Nikki seconds. Roll call, please.
Allen,
Allen, aye.
Caius,
Caius, yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Strathman,
Strathman, yes.
Wallace, Wojnicki.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
We are honored today to have a couple of people signed up to give us some public comments. So I would like to call Paul Cameron. Mr. Cameron, please come to the podium. Is the mic there? Pardon? Oh, three?
Using the hand mic?
Oh, okay, thank you.
we haven't seen
Okay.
Hearing me now? Okay,
5 minutes, please. And this stop sign is the signal.
thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Paul Cameron. I live at 3810 Ridge Point Drive in Geneva, which is in the Prairie Ridge subdivision, which is one of the neighborhoods that will be affected by this proposed solar project. Our neighborhood, as well as Fisher Farms, clearly have a line of sight to this project. And there's a number of other homes certainly that would have some impact by this project as well. What I'd like to speak to today are the aesthetics of this project. While I understand the financial impact and the benefits of the solar project for the county buildings on that property, I don't think I see that there's much attention been given so far to the aesthetics in terms of what kind of sight lines are going to be visible from our neighborhood, as well as just anyone driving up and down that road. The presentations that we've heard at the town hall and then the subsequent administration meeting that preceded this have only talked about an old plan that was in place when the landscaping plan was developed for the courthouse and the jail, and that there was a berm in place, or at least in design, during that portion of the planning. I think subsequently there was some additional landfill added to that berm as unuseful material was excavated from the site for the buildings, as well as the retention pond that's on more of the north end of that property. But from what I understand and what's been presented to us, the intent of this project is to not really do much to try to camouflage this, all the panels that are going to be put in. In fact, it even goes so far as to be heightened by the fact that you're trying to, or it's been discussed to only take the existing north berm down 15 or 20 feet and then build on top of it. So there's already going to be a footprint of solar panels, and yet they're going to be, in addition, elevated at a much higher level if you intend to build on top of this berm. We would just ask that you please reconsider that approach and try to come up with some meaningful landscaping that will protect our views and our home values. I don't know why it can't be completely flattened and then have the site built on a flatter plane and maybe use some of that material to berm up as can be. And I understand there's a need to keep the sun reaching these panels for them to be effective, but there already is a south berm, in fact, in place for some protected views of the parking lot down there for where some of the officials park. So there already is some effort to have another berm there. And I think this could just be improved if you give some attention to the landscaping portion of this thing. We have a lot of concerns, whether it's health, aesthetics, how the decommissioning of this project will work. Other plans like in DeKalb, where there's more of a formal policy, have very formal constructs in terms of how the decommissioning aspect of this type of project will work too. You know, if this company were to just disappear at some point in time, there may not be any meaningful money available to do a proper cleanup and tear down of this project once it's over at the end of the lease terms. So I think we need a lot more thought given to certain aspects of this, but certainly more to the aesthetics in terms of the design. Because while I do understand the financial benefits of this, there are some aesthetics components to this that really need to be addressed better to be good neighbors to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cameron. We don't comment right away, but we hope we'll answer your questions today. And John Mead, please.
Good morning. And thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning and comment. I'm here for the same agenda item related to the power purchase agreement. And I don't mean to be redundant, but I would echo everything that Mr. Cameron has said, and I just have a couple other comments to add. My name is John Mead. I reside in the same subdivision. I'm in 3308 Ridge Point Drive in Geneva. I've been engaged with several of our board members, our HOA board members, and they've been engaged with the townhome board members. And the boards are supportive of us working with the county and county staff on resolving some of these issues that are concerns to us. I think our intent is to affect in some way positively the design of the project so that the county campus can continue to be good neighbors to us. And effectively to do that is to properly screen our view of that, particularly the folks that live along Brisher. The way the topography is out there, that their main living space is the second floor of their home. So they already look down on the site. So it's important to get the field as low as possible and effectively landscape or berm screen at least the Brisher side of the property to avoid the visibility of the field. I don't think maybe we can never eliminate the view of it from Brisher or from these homes, but if we can effectively minimize it so that the two can coexist, that would be great. The existing berm that's there, and one of the things I want to ask Ms. Klee is, everybody refers to the north berm. I'm not sure exactly what the north berm is. I see one large berm. I see other small mounds, but when I look at the berm, if you come out of our subdivision onto Brisher, there's a large berm that was built basically east to west, and that's the berm I believe that you were talking about shaving off 10 to 20 feet of. What I'd like some consideration to be given to is further lowering that berm, flattening the site, using some of that excess dirt to create a bermed landscaped screen, at least along Brisher. And I realize, as Mr. Cameron said, you have to balance out the sun angle and getting sun to these panels, but we need to effectively screen the visual if we can. There's also been some discussion of that the property, the 3,800 panels need to be protected with a fence. And if we have a bermed landscaped screening along Brisher, maybe the fence can be more decorative in nature than just a chain link fence, and or put on the north side of that landscape berm and landscaping, so the folks aren't looking out, sitting on their decks looking at essentially, commercial protective fencing. So just a couple things to consider. The other day I was at I think it was the administrative meeting, and board member John Martin had a suggestion that maybe the county board work with the city and or City of Geneva to talk about putting some landscaping, meaningful landscaping on the south side of Brisher, such that it affects less the sun's angle onto the panels, but would also help with the views from the homes here. So it's the other side of Brisher. Obviously have to be some coordination. There's some costs we realize in going to a decorative fence to going to increased landscaping, but hopefully that is something that can be incorporated into the budget, and considering the 25 years of savings, that it would be in the end something that's doable. So just want to stress, now is the time to get this right. We've been good neighbors. The county facility it operates as a quiet neighbor, and we hope to continue that way. But now's the time to get this right. Once you install panels up on top of a berm, it's never going to change. You're never going to come back and lower those. So now's the time to get the height right and the transition and screening right. So we intend to work with Ms. Klee and other city staff, our aldermen and our county board rep, Mr. Wallace, to have them come out to the site and see the perspectives from the homes, and they're willing to do that. We're in conversation to do that. So I think the Cameron said that anybody today that would want to come and see that perspective, they're happy to host them on their deck for a few minutes after this meeting, if that works. But thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Yes, I understand we're invited to your porch, to your balcony to see what it looks like. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for the public comments. Do we have any other public comments today? Okay, thank you. I'd like to move along in the agenda to Jody Wolnick. Ms. Wolnick, please.
Thank you. Today we have with us Walt Kelly from Illinois State Water Survey. Walt was previously involved in our Kane County multiple studies that were done for water quality on our private wells. We presented those several years back, and the increase in chlorides that we're seeing in those private wells as a result of the road salts. So he's been very integral in the information that's coming back to the county board as it relates to our shallow aquifers and the water quality in those aquifers. Mr. Kelly recently completed a 3-county study of lead in our domestic individual private wells. I know this has been a matter of discussion, certainly for municipalities with the replacement of lead service lines. Those municipalities do have opportunities for grant funding above and beyond what is available to our individual landowners. And so I thought it was important to bring Mr. Kelly here today to give an update on the study that he did for the lead in our private wells. So the board has some additional background if some funding opportunities come available. So I will ask Mr. Kelly then or Mr. Peters to bring up his presentation, and we can hear from Mr. Walt Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to present this research. This was work done in conjunction with some public health researchers at the University of Illinois, Chicago and Northern Illinois University. And the funding came from the Illinois Sustainable Technology Center. And the next slide, please. So lead in public drinking water is regulated by the lead and copper rule, which sets an action level of 15 parts per billion for lead at customer taps. It's currently under revision with a recommendation to lower that action level. However, in Illinois, and most, if not all states, there is really no regulation of domestic wells for water quality. Studies in several other states suggested that waterborne lead might be a concern in homes with domestic wells. So we were interested in learning if this was also true in Illinois. Next slide, please. So lead in tap water is mainly from lead service lines, solder or brass components within the plumbing system itself. These have been banned or limited in recent decades. So our main concern was with older homes that might have some of these higher lead components in their systems. Next slide, please. In addition to homes' pipes and fittings, there are also potential sources of lead in the well itself, especially, again, the older wells, including things like packers, brass components in the pumps, and galvanized metals. Thank you. Next slide, please. So leaching of lead from lead pipes and components is mainly a result of corrosivity of the water. This is a function of the water chemistry, and you can see there's a whole host of parameters that can affect corrosivity. If you could click the next one. But the most important factors are these here at the top: pH, alkalinity, chloride, and sulfate. Next slide, please. So there are several measures of corrosivity that are used for various applications. They all have their limitations. The one that we picked to study the most in this particular research is something called the Larsen Scold Index, which has been around for 60 or 70 years by now. And the equation right there shows just in general that if you increase chloride or sulfate concentrations, or you decrease the alkalinity in the water, then the water becomes more corrosive. And so this Larsen Scold Index is just kind of a rough measure of how corrosive the water is. Next slide, please. So our study was designed really as a pilot study, just kind of a first, pass at determining whether this is even an issue in Illinois. So we identified 3 counties with a wide geographic range in different hydrogeological settings: Jackson, Peoria, and Kane counties. Jackson County in the southern part of the state is very rural. It was not glaciated during the Pleistocene, and its main aquifer is a karst aquifer. Except for around the city of Peoria, Peoria County is also rural, with most domestic wells tapping glacial sand and gravel aquifers. Kane County is the most urban of the counties, with an eastern corridor being urbanized for a long time and increasing urbanization in the central part of the county. This includes a lot of road traffic, and the shallow aquifers have seen increases in chloride concentrations in recent decades that Jody was just referring to. Domestic wells in Kane County are finished in both glacial and shallow bedrock aquifers. So we worked very closely with the local health departments to get this research done, and they were in charge of recruiting the participants. And we were focusing on maximizing the number of older homes if possible. And in the end, we had 151 participants. Next phase, or slide, please. So there were 2 phases as part of this study. In the first phase, homeowners were trained to collect samples from their kitchen tap after a period of stagnation. That's the protocol for sampling for lead in water, is to let the water sit in your pipes for at least 6 hours, and then collect the water immediately as it comes out, what is also called the first draw. In addition, we wanted them to collect a 7th liter sample, which was assumed to represent a relatively flushed sample. We analyzed for total lead in all samples, and that includes both dissolved and particulate matter. And then we also filtered and measured dissolved lead in a subset, mainly the homes that had the highest lead levels. We also analyzed for the major corrosivity components: alkalinity, chloride, and sulfite in the 7th liter sample. We also asked the homeowners to fill out a questionnaire about their home, well, and water use. Then in the second phase, we went back to 30 of the homes with the highest lead levels. We asked the homeowners to resample from their kitchen tap while we collected a sample from their well. And copper was analyzed as well as lead as part of this phase. And we did a complete inorganic chemistry for the well water sample. Next slide, please. So some of the questionnaire results are of interest. Most of the people were aware of the lead issue in Flint, as I'm assuming you guys are as well. But a much smaller percentage were aware that water is a possible source of lead. So you can see 93% were aware of Flint, Michigan, but only 64% thought that water could be a source of lead. So there's a little bit of a disconnect here between what people heard and what they really know. Next slide. Information about their well and their plumbing system. Most of the wells were drilled, although you can see the second most highest percentage was don't know. And that's pretty typical. A lot of people don't really know much about their private wells. You can see also that most of the wells were old. As we were trying to focus on these older wells. And a fairly small percentage were aware of some lead in their well and plumbing system. It's also of note that most people don't spend much money to upkeep their well. Next slide, please. So this table summarizes the total lead results from the first phase. There was some variability by county, but the trends were generally similar. So if you look at the bottom first, that shows the complete results for all three counties. So almost about half of the samples had detectable lead in the first draw, and 34 or 23% in the seventh draw, in the seventh liter. Kane County was a little bit lower, 44% in the first draw and 13% in the seventh liter, that kind of flush sample. Concentrations were almost always greater in the first draw, although not always. And the concentrations could be quite high, with 5 of the samples, 3.3%, were above the 15 part per billion action limit. The highest concentration we measured was 76 micrograms per liter. Next slide, please. There are also clear differences in chemistry among the three counties. Jackson County has significantly lower concentrations of alkalinity and chloride, while Kane County had the highest chloride concentrations. That's most likely a result of the road salt runoff, but it had relatively low sulfate concentrations. So we used threshold values of 0.8 and 1.2 for the Larsen Scold index as kind of parameters to determine whether it's low, intermediate, or high corrosivity water. You can see most of the water in all three counties, about 80% in each county, was considered low corrosivity. Okay, next slide, please. So we did some statistical analysis, and these are the main findings that we found. First, older homes were more likely to have detectable as well as elevated lead levels, which is what we expected. And second, older homes with corrosive groundwater, as measured by the Larsen Scold index, were especially prone to having detectable lead. Next slide, please. This plot shows particulate versus total lead concentrations for the subset of samples with the highest lead levels. So you can see on the x-axis there, that's the total lead. So that's everything that's dissolved and particulate together. And then on the y-axis, that's dissolved lead. So that's water that's passed through a filter. So that line shows the one-to-one relationship. So any symbol that falls along that line would indicate that all the lead was in the dissolved form. And you can see for many of them, most of the lead was in the dissolved form, but for almost all samples, there was some particulate lead. This was especially true with the samples with the highest concentrations. As you can see there, those 2 red triangles and 2 black dots, those were our highest concentrations, and they were almost all particulate lead. Next slide, please, thanks. So in phase 2, we collected samples from the well in addition to the kitchen tap samples. So this plot shows the concentration of lead, total lead, in the different groups of samples. So on the left is the first draw, then the 7th liter, the flush sample, and then on the right is the water collected from the well. So if you just look at Kane County, you can see most of the elevated lead is in that first draw sample. There's still some in the 7th liter, but basically none was found in the well. And that's indicating to us that the source of the lead is really from the plumbing system, from inside the house. Now for Jackson County, I'll just mention that we did find a few samples where there was there was detectable lead in the well water itself. That wasn't found in Kane or Peoria County, but it was found in Jackson County. And that had something to do with their chemistry that I'll talk about in a minute. Next slide, please. So this shows a plot of the lead concentrations in the first draw, in the first phase of the study, and then on the y-axis is the lead in the first draw and the second phase of the study. So theoretically, all things being equal, we expect all the dots to fall along that 1-to-1 line, that they should have the same concentration no matter when we take the sample. But as you can see, there's quite a bit of variability, and especially those samples that had really high concentrations that were mainly particulate lead were much lower when we went out the second time. So this shows there's a lot of variability in these lead concentrations, especially probably having to do with the particulate matter. And so this is a little concerning because you could go out and collect a sample from your well or your tap and not find any lead, but then a couple of weeks later you might go out and find some. So it's hard to know when you actually might have a clean sample. So this kind of highlights the difficulty of replicating results, and it's especially seems to be true in dealing with particulate lead. Next slide, please. So one parameter that was of interest to us, it's not really of a concern up in Kane County, but down in Jackson County, they had some very low pH water. So most groundwater in the state of Illinois is about 6.5 to 7.5 is the pH. So it's pretty neutral. You can see the black circles for Kane, the lows on the low end 6.4 and the high end 7.2. But in Jackson County, we found some very low pHs below 6. And this acidic water is very corrosive. And this is very young water. It's moving very rapidly through these karst aquifers. There's high in oxygen, they're high in nitrate, and low in alkalinity, indicating they're really young and they're very corrosive. So it indicated to us that karst areas might be especially susceptible to lead contamination because of the corrosivity of the water. Not really a concern in Kane County, however. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, we have found that homes with domestic wells can be vulnerable to lead contamination in a variety of settings. This is especially true in older homes with older wells. The hydrogeological and geochemical settings can be important variables affecting the lead and the water corrosivity. And it's our understanding, based on years of experience and also the results of the survey, that domestic well owners really need assistance in protecting their water quality. They're kind of left on their own. There's very few rules and regulations. There's almost no oversight. So it's our belief that they really need help in dealing with problems like this. Next slide, please. So we do have a follow-on study. We recently, or before the pandemic hit, we got funding from Housing and Urban Development to expand this study. We're adding 2 new counties, Champaign and Whiteside. And we're also expanding our sampling to look more closely at the variability in the lead concentrations, sampling over several day periods. We are also providing and evaluating mitigation measures, and this can include replacing lead-containing components in the plumbing and the well, adding a reverse osmosis kit system to in the kitchen, or using a point of use filtration, and then we'll evaluate how effective those are at removing the lead that people have. And this includes Kane County, and as well as Peoria and Jackson County that are part of this follow-on study. Next slide, please. And so this is my final slide. Just want to mention that the Water Survey has developed a program called privatewellclass.org. This is a series of lessons that people with private wells can take free of charge at their own self-pace. It's 10 lessons. And there's also additional webinars with answering particular questions. They're recorded and available online. There's a couple of them on lead, I know. There's also a website that serves as a resource. And so any of you have a private well, I would encourage you to take this class, or if you know of anybody who has a well, it's very useful. As I said, earlier, the homeowner with a private well is completely responsible for making sure that well works, and oftentimes they don't have the tools to actually make that happen. And that concludes my study. Thank you for listening. I'll answer any questions you may have.
I have a question, please. This is Mavis Bates. You said, I wrote down that the plumbing system inside the house is a common and most common source of lead. By that, did you include the well? And the pump?
No.
Okay.
So yeah, we're finding that it's mainly the pipe or the fittings apparently inside the house itself. And one of the slides I showed that there was almost no lead found in the well water samples that we collected.
If I could just ask a follow-up question, Walt. So a lot of times we're talking about lead service lines. So obviously there's a line that goes from the well to the house, and then you have the internal plumbing to it within the house. Is any of your studies looking at to separate out how much is internal to the house versus that service line that comes from the well to the house?
Yeah, so as part of this follow-on study, we're providing plumbing and well assessments. So the plumbing assessment will be done by the Illinois Department of Public Health. So they're basically going to go into the house, look at the plumbing, look at the pressure tank, see if there's any lead fittings that they can identify, or lead-containing fittings. And then a driller in the county is going to be looking at assessing the well itself, determine if there's possible sources of lead in the well. So yeah, kind of through an inspection process, although we're not calling it an inspection because there's no rules or regulations involved. It's really assessment.
Mr. Caius?
Question?
Oh, Ms. Strathman?
Yes, the private well class, is that geared to Illinois water?
No, it's not necessarily. I mean, a lot of the examples that are given are from Illinois, just because that's where we do our work. But it's a national or even internationally useful.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Caius?
Caius, District 23. Yeah, very interesting study. As far on the part of the class here, have you gone to the like our Kane County Farm Bureau, the Illinois Farm Bureau agencies? Because I know they offer testing to wells here in the county for farm related, but it seems like that would be maybe a good way to get it out to market and educate people that it's available.
That's a good idea. We have not actually approached the Farm Bureau in any of the counties on this study, but yeah, the sampling, as you say, that they offered was for things like nitrate that are concerned in rural areas. Of course, the sampling for lead is a little different because you have to take it in the house and you have to let the water sit for a minimum of 6 hours. So it's a little more complicated, but and the homeowner usually has to do it themselves.
So the class might be able to it might be a conduit for reaching people to increase your size of that are taking the class.
Yeah,
reach out into the community.
Thanks for the suggestion.
Yeah, question about I got three questions I made notes here on, and I apologize. I looked at this last night, made notes on my computer, and I guess I didn't stage it right. I think I left it on the dryer this morning when I went out the door. Why did you pick these three counties? Was it what was the strategy for picking these three? And then also why the next two? Champaign's got the university. It's nice and convenient, of course, but
yeah. So the short answer is we had local health departments who were interested and willing to work with us. We did provide them some funding. We were looking for a kind of a variety of kind of hydrogeological conditions and geographic. Initially, we were looking at some preliminary data, and we wanted to focus on counties that had already shown that they had some lead issues with like lead levels in children, things like that. And unfortunately, it just came down to some county health departments were just not interested or didn't have the bandwidth to work with us. And so these three, or actually now 5 counties, are the ones that really stepped forward and said, yeah, we're really interested in this and we'd love to work with you. So the short answer is it's really those counties stepped up.
I had a question about on your third or fourth slide there. There was the word premise, like premise lines. It was I thought I was looking up some of the. Can we pull up the slides? Like in the third paragraph or something. Maybe you can find it for us. And when I was looking up, I was interested in finding out about right there, the last line, well casing drop pipe for pump premise plumbing. Is that premises, or is that a new term for me?
No, that just means it's the fancy word for home.
Okay. Just curious if I missed something.
Oh,
Also, I was curious about the LSI scale, and apparently there are 2 scales listed. I Googled it. to go to a credible source, of course. There was your Larsen, and then there was a French sounding name or something. Are there two
No,
different scales?
Langolier, there's actually more than
Langolier.
two. And we looked at several of them. The Langolier, the problem with that is you really need a complete water quality analysis, and we didn't have the funding to do that. And one of the things I mentioned, pH being important, and the issue with pH is unless you take the pH measurement when you collect the sample, you can't really, when you take it back to the lab, it may change. So part of pH is the dissolved carbon dioxide, and oftentimes that just degasses naturally. And so you get a different pH reading when you go back to the lab. So we didn't use that one just because we didn't have the data to actually use it. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Just didn't fit
They have the same, I hate acronyms, LSI, they're both LSIs.
Yeah.
So we did the LSI test and this guy did the LSI test and
There
they
you go.
didn't have the same name and they didn't have, I don't think they had the same formula. The one on your paper that we got from you looks like a Morse code, ... formula. I don't know. Just trying to figure that out, but just out of my curious. What's a sandpoint well?
It's basically kind of driven into a very shallow sand deposit. They're quite easily contaminated, actually. They're very shallow.
So it's just plugging right into the sandy
much.
soil.
Yeah.
Kind of like dug one. In the particular lead, you think maybe some of that is, you had the homeowners doing the sampling?
Correct.
So you think maybe some of those outliers might be sampling error or?
It's quite possible. It's possible they've switched the bottles and, the 7th liter was the first draw or whatever. But, that's something we didn't have control over. We had the health department staff actually go out to the home and show the homeowner how to collect the sample. There's a video that we put online for them to look at to make sure that they did it correctly. But the particulate matter, that's coming off of the flakes and little pieces that are on the pipes and fittings, and you turn on the water and sometimes they come out and sometimes they don't. It's
Hit and miss then.
It's really hit and miss. And we talked to people at US EPA about this who have been thinking about this for a long time, and they recognize it as a very serious issue because it's very difficult then to actually understand whether or not you have a lead problem.
Yeah, one pipe, you might cook up a pot of rice and have lead in it, and then the next one not, right? With the
Yeah,
water.
so I mean, one of the easiest protocols for lowering your lead levels to let your water run and let it run for a few minutes before you use it for drinking or cooking. And that seems to work, at 95% 99% of the time, maybe. It's not really solving the problem, but it's flushing it down the drain, basically.
Yeah, except for the ones where it was the opposite. That's why I wonder if it was sampling
Right.
error.
Yeah, we wondered that too, but
Yeah.
there was just no way we could figure that out.
Statistically, you're still better off to let it run.
Yeah.
And in the particulates, does reverse osmosis take out the dissolved lead or just particulates?
Well, it's actually designed to take out the dissolved lead, but I think there's usually a pre-filter that will remove particulate matter.
Interesting, a lot of data there. Thank you. I think that was all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Caius. I have one.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
Ms. Moen.
Yeah, thank you. Woniki here, and thank you for your informative presentation. My district is, I have the highest concentration of wells in Kane County in my district. And I'll pass around the information about your private well class. Thank you so much for that. And just a quick question, in checking the water on the interior of the house, does a water softener make a difference in your study?
So we didn't actually, so we did collect that information, whether or not there was a softener. And I think up in Kane County, almost all people have a softener.
A softener.
But so the issue though really is the lead could be downstream from that softener. So it may remove lead upstream of there, but then if the water is sitting in the pipes downstream of there, it could still pick up some lead.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Any more questions?
Actually, yeah, I know, how can we help? I guess, I think I had help down there. If we want to help, other than getting it out to our neighbors and things, how can we as a county or our staff help best?
Well, I guess I would suggest you talk to your health department. You guys have a great health department. They've been very active. We haven't actually gotten started with them yet on this next phase of the project. Yeah, I guess I would talk to them about ways to reach more people and to have more data collected so that we can identify. Part of the we were hoping that part of the infrastructure bill would include things for rural communities and rural homes, things that like this, issues that it's very difficult for an individual to deal with because it can be pretty expensive to deal with a problem like this. But I don't know if you guys have kind of funding programs that could help out with that or not.
I think Kane Connects periodically runs an article about contacting the health department and water studies. You bring a water sample. I think
Excellent.
anytime you can bring a water sample over to the public health department, and they'll
Okay.
check it for you.
Yeah, and we have a lab at the water survey. So if anybody is interested in collecting a sample and sending it to our lab, we ship out the bottles in the shipping containers. So if they want to check, they can. It's very simple. It's a fee. There's a fee. I can't remember how much it is, $30 or $40, I think, for a lead analysis. But I don't know. Maybe you don't want to know. I don't know.
Sound like some people didn't know.
Yeah.
In consideration of the time.
Sorry.
I would like to.
Copy, please.
Copy, Mr. Copy, yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is in regards to the chloride. Is that the premise of my concern is that chloride essentially the same as table salt chloride? Is the first question, and then the second question is, what are acceptable limits for chloride? Is there an acceptable limit for the chloride? And is there a cause for alarm?
So chloride, yeah, it's basically table salt. It's most of the chloride that's getting into the shallow aquifers is sodium chloride through the road de-icing processes. So chloride is not toxic to humans, but it is, as you hopefully got from my presentation, it's a corrosion issue. It's an ecological problem if it gets into streams and wetlands. So the EPA has set what they call a secondary standard of 250 milligrams per liter, and that's basically for taste issues. They also have some ecological standards, and these are kind of complicated. There's like a 4-day one and a 1-day one, a chronic and acute standards. And in some of the streams in Kane County and in other parts of Northeast Illinois, yeah, they're reaching and surpassing some of these standards. So yeah, I think it's a concern. I'm not sure how much we can do about preventing it. I mean, part of it is doing sensible salting. I know Jody is part of that committee, I think, looking at ways to reduce the application. But chloride sodium chloride is so soluble, it's going to get into our water resources no matter what. So the best thing is to try to limit it as much as possible. But of course, we need to keep our roads clear and safe in the wintertime. So it's a real conundrum, and I don't really have an answer for that. But it is a bit of a concern that it's getting into our shallow aquifers, in my opinion.
Any more questions? Well, I have one more comment. Lead is a zero tolerance toxin. Is that correct? Do people know that? Is that part of your efforts here?
Yeah. So when we send the results to the homeowners, we mention that there is no safe level of lead in drinking water, and to contact their health department if they have issues and concerns.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for your
You're welcome.
presentation.
Thank you for having
Ms.
me.
Wolnick, do you have any other comments to add? Okay, this was very informative, and by the number of questions, you can see how interested we are in this issue. And we will be very interested to see phase 2 of your study, because
Me too.
that's where the solutions will come in, right?
I certainly hope so. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Mr. Shepro?
Yeah, so I guess what is the county follow-up to all this information? I mean, other than being informed,
Mhm.
what could the county do in terms of increased regulation, monitoring, et cetera, that would be within the authority of the county and the, to do? I guess that's a question for either our speaker or for Jody.
I think certainly one of the things is to continue to work with Illinois State Water Survey to get the best available data. We do, as Ms. Wojcinski mentioned, we have a lot of older wells that predate 1986. And the concern is that the education level and the information isn't out there. One of the requests we sent into Lauren Underwood's office was for some funding for the county to directly engage with private well owners and start to install the filters that Mr. Kelly spoke of as a first step in our lower to moderate income areas that have private wells to ensure that they are having safe lead levels coming out of their drinking taps. The next phase of that potentially would be to start to work with homeowners on their plumbing. We do know that we do have some lead service lines from our private wells going into the house, which may be a major contributor. And so we'll be looking for Mr. Kelly's second phase of the study to give us more information about how much is interior to the house versus lead service lines. And the challenge with that, the ARP money does have a water quality portion. The challenge for these individual landowners is that there isn't the funding available out there for lead remediation like there is in municipalities. And so not only do we have a very large number of private wells, but we also don't have funding for these folks either. So it's both of those paths we're going to need to follow, both from the educational side of things, the kind of just belt and suspenders approach would be to do the filter and some of the plumbing replacement. But again, as Mr. Kelly pointed out, it's going to be very expensive. And unfortunately, many of these wells are in our low to moderate income areas. And so funding will be a challenge for them.
Do you have an estimate on the number of wells that are potentially affected?
It's in the thousands, easily in the thousands, if not tens of thousands.
So and would the remediation, if you had to do a new well, I assume it would have to be a deep well and not a shallow aquifer well.
That's not necessarily true. In our county, we have opportunities to do shallow as well as deep. The well, I think contributions from the well is kind of the easier piece to piece out. I think the more complicated issue is the plumbing within the house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think the wells as a rule are going to be the issue.
Okay, I'm sorry. Now I do have to ask one more question because I'm a little, I don't understand something. The lead service lines, that is not an issue with a home with a well. Is that true? Okay, Jody.
That is actually true, that we do have lead service lines on some of our private wells.
Private wells.
So we have
Okay.
that issue as well as fittings on those service lines that are potentially an issue in addition to what might be interior to the house and their fittings.
Okay, I thought a lead service line was from the water main to the home.
At the
Also-
time that it was, we
Yeah.
have wells from the 1920s and that's what they were using to run from the well to the home.
Yeah, my house is 1898. I drink distilled water. So, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. This is so interesting. I think we'll need to get you back for phase 2 if possible.
Glad to do it. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Miss Ivy, Ms. Klee has informed me that we have one more public speaker, and she will include that in her phase, in her part of the program. Now, Ms. Jarland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have an update for recycling.
The big news is that we have a fourth electronics recycling drop-off location in Elburn at the old Waste Management Transfer Station, which is now owned by GFL. They, in partnership with Lakeshore Recycling Services, who are rebranding as LRS, are now, LRS is running, excuse me, is running this electronics waste center, is what they're calling it. So it's not another Kane County recycling center like we have in West Dundee, Batavia, and Aurora, but it is a fourth option and a west option for our other rural residents to use for electronics. I worked closely with Katie Neary from Lakeshore from LRS to get their pricing aligned with ours so that at least people are paying the same price for the TVs and monitors there, and was fairly successful. So the first two prices are the same. If it's under 21 inches measured diagonally, it's $25. If it's 21 inches and above, our cost is $35. And so they have a third bracket though. If it's over 65 inches, they're going to charge $100 for it. Those are for those big screens or the big old rear projection TVs. And fair enough, you know, and people will see that when they go online, they'll see that in the information and they may decide to just go ahead and drive to Batavia and pay $35 for it instead, which is their option. It is a little different in that people do have to register before they go. But again, it's a great resource for people, and it does also benefit us because, and LRS and eWorks, because in that partnership, they will be coming through the county program according to the law, the Consumer Electronics Recycling Act, which requires Kane County to have either 4 permanent sites or 4 events for each of those sites that we don't have. And we now have 4. And so we don't have to have any events. If we don't want to, we can, but we don't have to. So that's a money saver, which is great since we have been nicked a little bit with the riverboat. We will have reduced number of events next year, probably just the extravaganza or some shredding events perhaps. Haven't planned that yet. But anyway, good news all around. Real quick, because of time, I just wanted to remind you all that we have 3 events left for this year, and they're all very different. The next 2, I should say, are at 540 South Randall in St. Charles, the normal place. September 11th, we'll be collecting electronics, clothing, books, and latex paint, aerosol products, and small propane canisters. And then on October 23rd is the final document shredding event for the year. And we will have 4 trucks there that day, so shouldn't have too much of a overflow, but it's always a busy day. And then the November 6th event is over at Pushing the Envelope Farm in Geneva, and it is our squash and pumpkin, hay bale, corn stalk recycling event that day from 9 a.m. to noon. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that the Mill Creek hauler contract bids are due today at 3 o'clock. So I'll be up there for the opening at purchasing, and we'll start my assessment of the bids that we receive. As far as the timeline, that recommendation to contract will be coming to you all, to this committee, on the 17th of September. And then we'll ultimately hit the county board on the 12th of October. The contract ends on the 29th of October. And so the first day of the new contract is the 30th. I've been informed by one of the haulers that that's a very short period of time, if the hauler changes, for them to be able to order all the bins and contact all the residents and say, do you want a different size bin, and all of that sort of thing, and to get some sort of educational outreach to the community members between, the 12th of October and the 29th. So what I have discovered from Maria Calamy in purchasing, and she's not here, but she said that we can do, after this committee hears the recommendation and approves it, if you approve it, that we can issue a notice of offer to award to the potential awardee and say, look, it's moving through the board process now, the approval process, and I can start working with them on the wording of the outreach and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to let you know that that's the plan, and see if anyone had any questions or concerns about that.
Any questions?
Okay.
Okay.
It
keep
has
us
been done
posted.
before, she said, that this sort of thing, if the timeline is short. So
Okay.
that's the plan.
I think there's a recycling day on October 2nd in Aurora, but that's not you. That's not us.
No, that must be City of
Okay,
Aurora. I
okay.
don't know anything about it.
Okay, so latex paint, woohoo.
Oh, yeah?
That's gonna get the rest of my basement cleaned out.
Great.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions for anybody, for Jennifer? Okay, thank you. Now I would like to call on Ivy Clee.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So we did miss a public comment earlier in the meeting. Is it all right if I read that?
Yes, please.
Okay. And I'm sorry about that. That was a miscommunication on our end. So this public comment that I'm going to be reading was submitted by Sherilyn Cameron. Dear committee and board members, thank you again for listening to my concern about the planned solar project at Peck and Bricker Road. How can I be assured that there will be no adverse health effects from living so close to a massive project of this size? I am sure there have been studies done showing no ill effects from the solar panels installed on roofs of homes, but this project is different. Plans are to install 4,352 solar panels within 250 to 400 feet of residential homes. What studies address the exact situation? Who have the studies been done by? What was their vested interest in the study? Would you choose to have your family live next to a huge solar farm? Please keep these questions in mind as we hear about the results of the studies that will be presented later in this meeting. Thank you for understanding my concern, Sherilyn Cameron.
Thank you, Sherilyn, for those words.
And thank you to everyone who did speak at public comment. We appreciate your feedback. And today I have a resolution for approving the solar power purchase agreement and lease for solar energy with GRNE Solar Field for a 2 megawatt field at the Judicial Center. So we're bringing this resolution today to the E&E committee and asking for approval of this resolution. The documents that are attached in the agenda are the power purchase agreement, the land lease, and a bid synopsis. So the bid synopsis is a summary and analysis of all of the informal bids that were submitted by solar vendors. We sent out a request for proposal for more information regarding the solar project in May. So the bid synopsis summarizes that GRNE Solar had the highest, ranked the highest in our evaluations. So please feel free to reference that bid synopsis, and please feel free to let me know if you have any questions on that. We have been working with Progressive Energy Group. Arnie Schrammel is here today to answer any questions that any board members have. And also we have Eric Peterman, the CEO of GRNE Solar, on Zoom today to answer any questions at the end. I have a presentation that I would like to present before we move forward with the resolution. Blair, if you want to head to the presentation. So this is the power purchase agreement.
Ms. Clee, I'd like to add for the public that this agenda is on our website under the committees and energy and environmental, the agenda for today. So all this information is on our website.
And my contact information will be available at the end. So please feel free to reach out to me and I can send that directly to you. So the last E&E committee meeting, I brought a presentation to discuss the details of this project and gain feedback and interest from the county board members. And so today we are moving forward with the resolution for the approval of the power purchase agreement and lease. Next slide, please. So here we have the proposed solar site. So the site is at the Judicial Center at the northeast corner of Peck and Bricker Road. You can see that those are labeled on the image up there. At first, we were looking at a few different sites on the Judicial Center campus. So we looked at the roof of the multi-purpose building. We looked at the field that is to the northeast of the multi-purpose building. And then we looked at this site. We had solar vendors come out and do a site assessment to see which site would make the most sense and be feasible for implementing this type of project. And a majority of the solar vendors came back to say that this site would be the most feasible for this kind of project. And we also had to keep in mind for any future proposed additions to the Kane County master plan for this campus, we wanted to make sure that this project site would not interfere with any future additions of the Judicial Center and the parking lot that you can see up there. Next slide, please. So we had a town hall meeting last Tuesday in the Kane County boardroom. Oh, thank you. Thanks. We had a town hall meeting here on August 3rd at 6 o'clock. So I'm just going to give a quick summary of what happened at that meeting. We had 19 attendants via Zoom, 5 attendants in person, and 89 views on the YouTube channel. So there was a good amount of participation from the public. Some of the main concerns that the residents addressed during that meeting and that were also talked about today were the chain link fence that is proposed to go around the solar array, the direct view of solar panels for the neighbors. So this image was submitted by the Camerons to the right. You can see that's their view. And then also a decrease in property values was another issue that was brought up during that meeting. So on the note of a decrease in property values, we did receive some information from GR&E. They provided 2 studies that were both done in Illinois counties on property value studies of properties that were close to or adjacent to solar fields. Both of the studies found that there was no negative impact to the adjacent property that could have been attributed to the solar farm within close proximity. And the studies found that the property values could increase up to 7%, but on average increased by 2%. Please feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in seeing those studies. I'm happy to provide you with those documents. As far as some of the concerns that were addressed today during public comment, and also a concern that was addressed during public comment at the administrative committee meeting earlier this week on if there are any health or safety concerns with a solar field of this size that is proposed, in particular electromagnetic radiation. So I have been working very hard to get some answers for the public over the past couple of days. I have received some information and documents back. So I reached out to an environmental scientist at the US EPA, and they sent me a paper titled The Health and Safety Impact of Solar Photovoltaics, which was written by NC State University's Clean Technology Center. And I do have these documents that I can pass out after the meeting to anyone who's interested. The paper was written in May of 2017, and a quote that I wanted to include is in 1997, the National Academics of Science were directed by Congress to examine this concern, the concern being electromagnetic radiation, and concluded based on a comprehensive evaluation of published studies relating to the effects of power frequency electric and magnetic fields on cells, tissues, and organisms, including humans. The conclusion of the committee is that the current body of evidence does not show that exposure to these fields presents a human health hazard. Specifically, no conclusive and consistent evidence shows that exposures to residential electric and magnetic fields produce cancer, adverse neurobehavioral effects, or reproductive and developmental effects. So this was the document that was shared with me by a scientist at the US EPA. I also have an email citation from a representative at Argonne National Labs. And I have that printed out. I'm going to share that really quickly. So this is from Dr. Seth B. Darling, who is the director at the Center for Molecular Engineering, the director for Advanced Materials for Energy Water Systems Center at Argonne National Laboratory. So the question that this is all via email. So I reached out asking if there would be any radiation concerns for neighbors living across the street from a 2 megawatt solar array. So that was the question that I posed, and the email response that was sent back to me. Solar panels emit no harmful radiation. They absorb light, which becomes a combination of electricity and heat. The electricity is the good stuff. The heat represents lost energy, but is not harmful to anyone. A solar array doesn't emit any more electromagnetic radiation than that of electrical wires in our homes. Moreover, the electricity generated by solar panels is direct current, which does not generate fields like AC carrying wires do. So that's from Argonne National Labs. And then I am also in the works of obtaining a citation from a representative at Fermilab. I was also put in touch with a representative from the University of Illinois, Philip T. Krein, the research professor and director at the Granger Center for Electric Machinery and Electromechanics at the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And I will read that email communication. Again, I proposed the same question, if there were any kind of radiation concerns for residents living across from a 2 megawatt solar field. Solar panels are designed to absorb as much light as possible. The typical concern in this direction is glare, as sunlight reflects off the panels. But decent panels are much less reflective than other surfaces, less than a painted white wall on a building, for instance. Some people ask about electromagnetic radiation from panels. This comes from the inverters and wiring, not really from the panels themselves. Certified residential inverters must meet FCC Class B limits as to air conditioners and other residential appliances. The potential concern is communications interference. The only situation in which this has raised concerns are where solar farms are installed very close to aircraft navigation radars or military radars. Yes, there is literature, see for example, and he provided a document from the Renewable Energy Program Office at the US Department of the Navy, which I have available if anyone would like to see. Continuing the communication, I found a number of old papers on this subject of electromagnetic interference from solar panels, but modern inverters must meet rigorous standards, and most of the papers I saw were examining obsolete technology. So that is from University of Illinois. And then we also received information from GR&E Solar. The International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection has a recommended magnetic field level exposure of 833 milligauss. So I believe that this is the unit of measurement by which you can measure the magnetic field level of exposure. And so the recommended exposure limit is 833 milligauss. And then at the utility scale, which would be a PV site that we are proposing today, magnetic field levels along the fenced PV array boundary were in very low range of 0.2 to 0.4 milligauss. So magnetic, yep.
So the recommended maximum is 833, and this would be 0.2.
0.2 to 0.4.
Thank you.
So the magnetic field levels at the locations 50 to 150 feet from the fenced array boundary were not elevated above background levels, and background levels are less than 0.2 milligauss. So GRNE is aware, and they are taking their measurements on that. So if anyone has any other questions or concerns surrounding the electromagnetic radiation of the solar panels, please feel free to reach out to me, and I would be happy to share any of the resources that I have. Moving on to the next slide, some potential solutions. So going back to my presentation, in addressing some of the main concerns that the folks who spoke during public comment and during the town hall meeting had. We are going to work with GRNE Solar to upgrade the fencing that is facing Bricker Road to be aesthetically pleasing. I know that that was something that was brought up today, so we are aware of that. We'll have to talk to them about being able to place the fencing with it closer to the northern berm. And we are currently in the works and already speaking with Geneva to figure out where would be the best place to put parkway trees. Again, this is going to come at a cost to the county, but we could potentially use savings from this project. We definitely are going to look at placing meaningful landscaping on the south side of Bricker Road. So we just had a site visit on Wednesday, and after going out there, there is a lot of current vegetation that is both on the north side of Bricker Road and also on the south side. It kind of varies based on the placement. So I think it will actually end up working well to kind of just figure out what spots we need to place meaningful landscaping to be able to inhibit that view line. And again, we want to work with the neighbors and the public who are concerned about this project. We want to make sure we are addressing all of your concerns. Another potential solution that we had was a sign to demonstrate the environmental benefits outside of the project site. I have a few notes on some of the questions that were brought up at the administrative committee meeting that I'm just going to cover quickly. And some of them were also addressed today. So there were some concerns regarding the open plans of the current power purchase agreement regarding where solar panels are going to be placed. So we're working with GRNE to get cross-section options and the elevation point examples for the executive meeting that will be on September 8th. Again, we just had a site visit on Wednesday that went well. We met the project manager and got some clarification on what the site looks like, as well as where might be good spots to move the original plan of where that proposed, the original image of where the proposed site of the solar panels will be, and figure out where we can move solar panels so that they aren't directly in that view line of the residents across the street. However, engineering drawings will not be able to be turned out quick enough for the executive meeting. So those are going to be things that we will continue to discuss with GRNE in the coming months. But again, we are considering all of our options in figuring out how we can move solar panels around so that they are not in the direct sight line. We were thinking about moving some of the solar panels to the north, closer to that detention basin. However, I was made aware that there has been some discussion at the sheriff's office regarding potential expansion of infrastructure at that site. So we'll need to be in discussion with Sheriff Ron Hain about any potential additions to the judicial center before we make any decisions about where to place the solar panels. And we're also working with Chris Allen to see if we can get some of the teasel mowed down so we can have a better sight line of the site. When you're on premises, it pretty much looks like a field of teasel. So we're working on that. And then there was some talk today and also during the admin meeting of raising the southern berm as to block the view of the northern berm. And I do apologize, we don't have a great image to present today of what exactly the southern berm and the northern berm look like. But in the best way that I can describe that, if you're looking at the field from a neighbor's perspective, there is firstly the southern berm is kind of like this little hill, and then I would say maybe like 100 feet or so from there, there is a larger berm that is at a higher elevation. So the larger berm is currently at 790 feet. I actually don't know the elevation of the lower berm, but I will get that information for the next meeting at the September 8th executive meeting, and we will have a better picture to display to both board members and the public by then. So the reasoning that we cannot raise the southern berm, there are a few, is this would cause shading to the panels. So GRNE would have to conduct a shading study. The whole point of the solar panels is to be able to reach the sun, and should there be any kind of shading, then that would kind of defeat the purpose of the solar panels being there. And then B, there is current vegetation on the southern berm along the edge of that, and we want to keep that so as to sit in the middle of the sight line of where the homeowners are and where the solar panels are going to be. So if we were to elevate that berm or, add any soil to that, we would have to take out all of that current vegetation.
There's some nice trees.
Yeah, and it's a decent amount too. We were looking at the GIS images the other day. So those are the reasonings that we cannot elevate the southern berm, and the northern berm it's currently at 790 feet elevation. It's going to be brought down by 15 to 20 feet. And this is within the, I forget the name, but we checked out the original landscaping plan that was approved by, I believe, the Judicial Center Steering Committee. And their minimum elevation of the berm was at 768 feet. So that's the approved level of the berm as far as Kane County's landscaping plan for that area. And I know that there was discussion about leveling the northern berm. And I think, and Jody, you're welcome to speak to this a little bit more so, but from my understanding, we can't level the berm because that would cost millions of dollars. And there is also a landscaping plan in place that we have to follow. Is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, there's a overflow and drainage infrastructure in between the southern berm and the northern berm that routes the water from the eastern pond to the northwestern pond. So we can't bury that infrastructure. So the soil, in order to lower the northern berm or flatten that area completely, the soil would actually have to be hauled off. And as Ivy points out, the amount of cubic yards that would need to be hauled off, and we'd have to find a disposal location for that material, would be in the millions of dollars. So it would just not be, it would be cost prohibitive to do so. So we are able to, within the area of that southwestern quarter, to lower it that 15 to 20 feet to make it a more flat area to try to keep some of the panels on the backside of that berm. But again, we're looking at all the options available based on the site views from the residents to the south to try to minimize the number of panels that are directly facing those houses. And that will be something that will come through with our engineering and the cross sections with our GIS that's being provided to GRNE. They'll be able to pull cross sections so we can get a better visual of the amount of panels that will be visible to the residents.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. So that.
Avast with a question.
Mhm. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ivy, but you're right on the topic, and maybe this is oversimplifying it, but without changing the height of either of the berms, and considering the view that we could see in that picture from one of the neighbors, there are no tall trees on the top of the northern berm. And my understanding of the panels are that they can be placed where they not pivot, or not rotate, but pivot slightly to follow the track of the sun. Why not start just below the ridge of the northern berm and let the field begin going down the north face of the northern berm, thereby being out of the sight line of the neighbors to start with?
Arnie?
Again, that's going to depend on the engineering. When you're on the north side of the northern berm, you're also on the north side where you would normally put solar panels on a south side. So you're going to get a large shading effect from the northern berm. So that it's certainly something we're considering where we can, but I have a feeling that we're going to need to be set back. And that's one of the reasons why GRNE wants to lower that height of that northern berm so they can utilize more of that area without the shading that potentially would occur.
I'm just trying to imagine how much shade one could get if you place them in a fashion moving down that northern face, and they have the ability to pivot or track the sun, and there's no tall trees or vegetation at the top of the ridge of the northern berm. Where's the shade coming from?
The sun is to the south most of the year. So the sun, so you always want to put your solar panels on the south side of a slope or a roof.
The panels tilt, you angle them to the south.
Pardon
All
me?
right, well, those are my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Shepro? Thank
No.
you. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
I have not studied this plan to the extent that maybe I should have, but I know the time is late. Is this plan well enough advanced that you're prepared to vote on it today, or does this need to be re-examined in more detail in light of the many public comments we got?
We do need to vote on the resolution today. So we have a timeline that the solar company needs to meet in order to be eligible for Illinois funding that will allow the county to pursue this project at no cost to us. So that's why we're bringing the resolution to approve this power purchase agreement and land lease, which I have a quick summary on both and the resolution that I have yet to get to, but that is why we're bringing it today. We're bringing this item to the committee today.
I would just add too that us moving this forward in our process gives GRNE their commitment to the project, because they're going to be spending several $100,000 in engineering to get us these answers. And so in order to start the engineering, they want our side of the commitment for the project. They will not spend the engineering dollars if we are not committed to the project. And if we cannot get it engineered correctly or properly, as Ivy will point out in the review of the agreements, is that if it's not a workable situation for the county, that there's provisions in that agreement that we would then terminate the agreement.
Now, if there's been construction that they undertook, and for whatever reason, the agreement is terminated, is there a provision in the agreements where they will be responsible for removing or restoring anything that needs that? And if there is, what guarantees does the county have that they will be able to meet that at a future date?
That all I was going to address some of those that's going to be in the land lease agreement. So there is, let me get to my notes. So
Should we let Ms. Cleve finish her presentation? And then
I'll run through the
come
power
back to that
purchase
question.
agreement quickly, and then we'll get to the
Okay.
early termination section.
Thank you.
So the power purchase agreement, quick notes, it's a 25-year agreement. GRNE is required to remove the system at the end of the agreement, and they will perform all the maintenance. So they're required to remove the system, dispose of the panels, recycle. We want to make sure that we're taking in considerations about recycling the panels. Kane County purchases the energy from GR&E Solar. This is where we're going to save in our transmission fees, and that we're not purchasing the electricity directly from ComEd. The environmental attributes will be owned by GR&E. Again, that's where they're going to get those tax credits that are associated with this project. They'll perform all the construction, they will own the system, and they will be responsible for any system loss. The land lease agreement is also a 25-year lease. GR&E again handles the removal of the system at the end of life. Early termination by the lessee, which is Kane County, should the board find that this project is no longer beneficial to the county when they do get out there and assess the site more in depth. We are able to take early termination. And also, should there be any issues with interconnection or structural site issues, that was a big concern going into this project. So those are both options for early termination. And they will handle maintenance and repair of any kind of issues on the solar field. And then in terms of landscaping, like we talked about before, we're going to work with the city of Geneva to make sure that we do take into consideration meaningful landscaping for the neighbors. And then also as a part of the landscaping plan, we are looking at incorporating pollinator plantings and native plantings and figuring out where the best place would be to put those on the site and where we could be able to maintain those for 25 years. So before I get to the resolution, the items that are still open as far as the power purchase agreement and land lease, the Illinois Power Agency's SREC grants. So that's going to be the funding that's going to come through when the clean energy bill passes at the governor's office. That's what's going to allow the solar company to be able to receive revenue for this project, but allow the county not to have a cost to itself. The final engineering, we won't have that information until GR&E does a more thorough site survey assessment. And the final pollinator planting and maintenance, fence and tree planting, the ComEd interconnect, and potential adjusting of the field location. So both the county and GR&E will be working very, very hard to make sure that we get answers to all of these issues as soon as possible. And then quickly going over the resolution. So we're asking the committee to approve both the power purchase agreement and lease for solar energy with GR&E Solar Field 05 LLC for a 2 megawatt solar field at the Judicial Center, subject to review by the state's attorney office. So both of the documents that are included in the agenda were, at the time, I had not yet received the comments from the state's attorney office. But since then, I have been in discussion and I have received her comments back. So just a quick note, her notes to include were the notices should have a copy sent to civil division attention, and the signatory is the county board chairman who will be approving this resolution. Additionally, the lease was marked confidential and proprietary. However, there were no proprietary terms according to the state's attorney. So those were removed. And I believe other than that, the state's attorney determined that the terms looked fine. And the resolution is important to the county because it is an opportunity to create renewable energy infrastructure, promote energy efficiency and reliability, which are all principles that are within long-term plans like the Kane County Energy Plan, the Kane County 2040 Plan, the Operational Sustainability Plan, and the Green Building Policy. All of the benefits of this project will go to county facilities and reduce our dependence on grid electricity and lower our energy costs. I apologize, I don't have the numbers up here on this presentation, but at the last presentation, I did go over that we have been, based on the proposal that GR&E Solar submitted, our first year estimated savings with implementing this project would be just at $198,000 in the first year in saving on our utility transmission fees. And then that in the event that that estimated proposal is correct over the 25-year life of the system, that would look like just under $5 million in savings on utilities. And then with that, we could utilize the energy cost savings to reinvest in county-owned facilities to improve efficiency in operations and maintenance. And the timeline, so this resolution was brought to administrative committee earlier this week and was passed, and it's currently at Energy and Environment Committee today, and then we will be presenting this again at Executive Committee meeting in September, and then at County Board in September as well. So with that, I conclude my presentation. I apologize that it took up a lot of time, but we have Arnie Schrammel here to answer any questions, as well as myself, and the CEO of GRNE Solar, Eric Peterman, is also on the line.
Travis, with a quick question, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I missed that, I apologize, but what exactly is the deadline date for qualifying for this program?
Arnie, do you know the deadline date? And or Eric?
Hello, this is Arnie Schrammel with Progressive Energy Group. The deadline date, if the energy bill doesn't pass, will probably be pushed back. But if we're operating on the assumption that the energy bill is going to pass by the end of August, then we'd like to submit a full plan to Illinois Power Authority for the grant money at the end of September.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arnie. That didn't exactly clear things up for me. Is there an actual date existing now that could change, and it's all waiting for the governor's signature, or a date is yet to be determined?
Yeah, but with the energy bill not passed yet, we don't have an exact date. When we first started this project in the spring, we were operating on the assumption that the new CEJA bill or energy bill would be passed in May. But the truth is it's up in the air right now. I can't give you an exact date. So this could push back some more. Almost everybody we talk to in the industry and government says there will be a new energy bill. And Chairman Bates is involved heavily in that new energy bill, but right now we don't have it in place.
Okay.
Question,
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
I am Mr.
Wallace. Yes, I thank you, Ms. Clee, for such a thorough presentation and answering all those questions. You did an excellent job. I do, though, have several different questions to ask. First of all, regarding the contract itself, I did see provisions in the contract relating to assignment and allowing assignment of the contract by the contractor. I do have some concern on that, and specifically relating to decommissioning of the project. Is there anything, and I apologize for not seeing it in the contract if it's there, is there anything regarding to requiring a bond or a letter of credit that would ensure correct decommissioning of the project?
Arnie?
Yes, there is provisions that as the project ages out at the end, down in years like 23, 24, 25, that GRNE Solar has to provide either bonding or proof that they're financially capable of decommissioning the system at the end of 25 years. So it basically allows the county to stop paying for power if they're not, they don't provide those guarantees. And the county will be paying roughly $140,000 a year. So the county can legally suspend those payments in lieu of there not being financial guarantees and build up a bank. So the county, if the worst case scenario, if GRNE wasn't able to, the county would be building up funds that they could hire a vendor to do it themselves.
That's assuming though that the field at that point would still be operational. If the county would be saving that money, of course, the field would have to be operational.
Yeah, and there's also provisions that the field will have a 25-year production schedule, and GRNE Solar is guaranteeing that 85% weather-adjusted production per year for the full 25 years.
Okay. Regarding one of the things you talked about with, it's my opinion, I'm not a scientist, but the electromagnetic radiation, I think that you've gathered more than sufficient evidence that it's not really an issue to be concerned about. One of the questions I have, this site is within, I would think, not more than 2,000 or 3,000 feet from an FAA radar site. Has there been any discussion with the FAA about the impact of a site like this?
Not yet. I'm happy to reach out to them, but I have the document that does discuss that, and I believe it's just at a distance of I believe the distance is like within 150 feet.
Okay.
It's pretty close, but I will double check that. That's a great point.
Yeah. As far as I have some issues with the landscaping and the berming. I think that that's been raised, but the northern berm, I recall many years ago that there were issues with the roof on the Judicial Center, and specifically with lead runoff from the roof. I'm curious as to whether any of the soil that's there would be problematic if moved from the standpoint of lead leaching or any type of remaining particulate there. Would there be an environmental issue?
The issue with the lead from the roof was all remediated and that soil removed. And it was actually to the north of this site, right adjacent to the pond between this site and the judicial site. So no soil in this area. This was all from the original construction before the roof was even on top of the building. So all that contamination was related to that pond and nearby that pond where that roof runoff was going by.
Okay. You talked a few times about discussing this with officials from City of Geneva. The site itself is surrounded north, east, and west by the City of St. Charles. Has there been any discussion with any of the officials from St. Charles on the project? Any reaction from them?
There has not been, because of the fact that the site to the southwest was the site that was chosen. It was directly in view of the residents to Geneva. Had the site to the east been chosen, our intent was to work with the residents in St. Charles on that behalf. I'm not aware of anybody to the west, even though it is falling in St. Charles, it is a field.
Okay. And I know that there are some existing solar panels that are on another county-owned site to the south, the animal control, near the animal control facility. Was there any thought to expanding that site in lieu of developing this site, or is that not possible?
It's not possible because we're directly taking 3 of the meters on the judicial site and using the power generated from this field for those meters. So we would just need to be sending it back to the grid if it were on the animal control site. The power usage on that site is being provided at 85% of what their usage is through the field that's existing right there. So you need to be close to a ComEd connection point, and then we would basically be selling it into the grid as opposed to utilizing it for our own purposes.
Got it.
This is called the behind the meter.
Mhm.
This is the behind the meter system. So we get all the benefit
Sure.
and no transmission fees.
Okay. I guess that my thought, it seems like there are a lot of due diligence issues that kind of remain open. I mean, my own personal thought on this would be that we need to see the GRNE studies relating to property values. And there's a lot of talk about meaningful landscaping, but I don't know quite what that means. I really would like to know more about that. And especially, how does that affect the berming, both the south berm and the north berm? I've been out there to the site and I know what it's like. But I think that there are several concerns that are still pending in my mind. So my own thought would be to have more time. It seems like there's not really a deadline, a specific deadline date for submitting this. I know that it's been said that we'd like to submit it by the end of September. But unless there's some type of a deadline date that we should know, I would suggest continuing this to the next, at least for a month, to get these questions answered. But that's just my own feeling.
Madam Chair?
I'd like to make a comment, and maybe Eric can help me with this. I believe that by missing this deadline, GRNE would lose out on significant federal tax credits, and in doing so would make this economically not feasible. And by passing this today, we are moving it on to the next committee, but in no way, carving in stone the plans that have been made. And by passing this today, we would give GRNE enough of reassurance that they could go ahead with the engineering studies, which is what we need to understand the due diligence, to do more due diligence. So we got a little bit of a chicken and an egg going on here. So that's why we're hoping to pass this today, so that we can get the engineering studies done. I think Mr. Shepro is next.
So I want to go back to the questions I had asked before the PowerPoint. Could we go back to the slide that listed the lease issues? Because I find myself in substantial agreement with Mr. Wallace's comments, and I'm not sure I understood some of the answers. The first was with respect to the performance guarantee. Is that something that would be posted before the contract went into effect?
Are we talking the 85% production guarantee or?
But we're talking about we're talking about whatever mechanism exists or would exist to assure the county that at the end of the 25-year period, there will be sufficient resources available to remove and restore.
Yeah, the current agreement, that bond posting is near the end of the term, not at the front of the term.
Okay, so we would have no way of knowing that in 25 years, whether in fact a bond could be posted or a letter of credit obtained.
Yeah, the way the mechanism is designed today, not that that can't change, the way it's designed today towards the end of the contract, when you're getting near to that, then GRNE Solar has to be posting bonds or provide sufficient financial information that the county feels comfortable they have the resources to decommission the plant or the solar field. If the county's not comfortable with that, the county then can suspend paying for the solar production, which is about $140,000 a year, and build up their own funds so that they make sure that that site gets decommissioned properly at the end of the deal.
But of course, I think as Mr. Wallace noted, the ability to do that would depend on there actually being revenue to be generated.
Yeah, that the county would still continue to get energy.
Now, there are, for example, landscaping plan to be determined. I guess my question is, as I think Mr. Wallace indicated, what does that mean exactly? It means that we don't have an approved landscaping plan. If this goes on and approved by the county board, do we anticipate that by September there will be a landscaping plan to be finally approved, or is it still going to be determined? And if the latter, who makes the determination? And what happens if there's no agreement as to the landscaping plan? Would the county have the right to impose a landscaping plan? Would that give a right of termination to the lessee if they didn't like it? And kind of a continuation of that. If there is early termination by the lessee, are there financial consequences? Well, let me go back. I mean, it says early termination by lessee. Is there provisions for early termination by the lessor, i.e. the county? And in each of those cases, presumably if there's substantial financial investments up to that point, what responsibility would the county have, if any, to recompense the lessee for their out-of-pocket costs? I want to note that I did have a call a few minutes ago from Madam Chair, who raised a number of these questions and concerns with me, particularly with regard to the termination provisions and the extent of the guarantees to the county, that the county would not be left potentially with liability to take over in the event there were problems with the lease or the financial ability of the lessee. So I think these are all significant questions. And I understand, Madam Chair, your point about advancing this, but we're kicking the can down the road with, it seems to me, an awful lot of unanswered legal and financial questions. And frankly, I think this committee is better able to do that than to try to get into this discussion at executive committee, which would be the next step. I mean, we've already spent almost an hour on this.
I can jump in on the landscaping plan. That is not a responsibility of GRNE. So if we were to put that responsibility on them, they would just turn over that cost back to the county. So it's more well done if the county is working on that separately with a landscape architect and the city of Geneva, and directly with the residents in regards to that. So it will be a path parallel that we're taking, and then we'll be utilizing some of our savings on the electrical side of things to do the landscape plan that's approved by the county and also by the residents in that area. So that will be a separate agreement that our staff works on with an independent consultant to work on the landscaping through the Bridget Road corridor.
I'd like to speak to the early termination. And Arnie, you can help me with this if I need help. Early termination by the lessor or the lessee would not result in Kane County owing any money or having liability towards towards GRNE. Is that correct, Arnie?
Yes.
At any time that we decide this is not working for us, we can cancel the contract and not be out of pocket, not have liability. We don't want to do that. We want to be in good faith with GRNE.
But if we did that and there had been work done, are they then responsible if we terminate for any reason to, at their expense, remove and restore what's been done?
You know that, Arnie?
You know what? I'm gonna have to read that section. I don't know if Eric Peterman, can you answer that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Arnie. Thanks, Ivy. Sorry, I haven't spoke up yet, but I'm here to answer any questions if needed. Thanks for the great presentation, Ivy, and discussion here. To that point, we would not move forward with any construction work, any physical work on site until all of the incentives have been approved, all of the engineering has been approved, permitting, and then at that point, once the contracts are finalized, then we would move forward. So if you wanted to pull out at any time before that, before the construction is done, then there wouldn't be any of the gray area as to what would be there, what would need to be removed. We would make sure that all that was ironed out before we physically mobilized to do the construction on site.
Ms. Wonicky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ivy. You've put a lot of work into this, and Madam Chair, you have as well. It definitely shows, but I always speak what's in my heart here. Here's what I'm hearing today. There's no exact date. We will have final engineering later from somebody else, another board member, not Todd, somebody else. There's going to be a chain link fence, maybe black. There might be a wood fence. There's talk about the southern berm. There's talk about the northern berm. We're going to put in meaningful landscaping, but then we have to speak with the city of Geneva first, okay? There's potential solutions. In my mind, this is our working committee. In my mind, the neighbors, and because I've been a neighbor before, I've been in your situations, the neighbors should know all the answers to these questions before we move ahead. They should know what's going to be going up exactly with the north berm, the south berm, the potential landscaping, the chain link fence, the black fence, the wood fence, whatever it's going to be. And I almost feel like this is a little premature. I feel a little better speaking about this because it seems that we don't have an exact deadline. So I don't know if holding this off for 30 days or whatever would harm moving forward later, or if it's a possibility.
Somebody can
Eric.
make a motion.
Eric Peterman's going to speak on that really quick.
I'm
on
sorry.
the timeline and urgency.
Okay, who will speak?
Eric Peterman.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Sure.
I can provide a little bit more context around that. There's currently a wait list that's being accumulated in chronological order, and it will come first serve as to who's on that wait list as to when they apply. So the urgency of getting on that wait list is to make sure that we're in line for the funding when the bill does pass. The longer that you wait, the lower down the wait list that you'll be. And what we've seen from the first round of funding that was passed 2 or 3 years ago is that there were way more projects submitted than there were funding available for. In fact, there was about 10 times as many projects that were submitted that there was actually funds for. So the urgency of getting on the wait list as soon as possible is to make sure that we do secure those incentives so that the project is still viable financially for the county. And there's been some discussion about working through the details of what the engineering and all of the pre-work. As soon as we move forward with the resolution, we can get the answers to those as we work through this pre-engineering. There's no cost to the county. All of that is going to be borne by GR&E. But that'll help us get the final design as to exactly where the modules will be located, what's possible on the current landscape. So that's what moving forward today would allow. But I just wanted to make sure that that was understood on the timeline and the wait list as well, to make sure that we get in line as soon as possible for that funding that is actually paid into by all of the ratepayers. So anybody who's has a ComEd bill is actually paying into the fund that is going to support this project. So this money is there and available. It's going to go to solar projects, whether it's Kane County or some other project. So being able to take advantage of that is important. Otherwise, those funds will be diverted to other projects. I hope that helps, but happy to answer any other questions.
Mr. Caius?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Caius. So my understanding is that the vote from this committee is the vote that keeps the project going. If we don't vote it on this committee, then it's not like we wait. We don't do any engineering then. Is that correct?
Eric, do you want to speak to that a little bit? Or
obviously, there are a lot of approvals needed to move forward on a project like this. So I think the importance of moving forward today just keeps things on track for the additional meetings that are upcoming. If this gets delayed, then we will have to delay as well without being able to move forward with certainty that this project is going to happen. It wouldn't make sense for our company to go spend significant time and money on engineering if this project's not looking like it's going to move forward. So we're sticking our neck out a little bit in doing some of this pre-work because we've been awarded the project. But if we don't have certainty that, that this is heading in the right trajectory, we can't then go spend a lot of money on engineering and continuing to invest time with it.
Oh, thank you. And then on following that question would be that if we do pass it today and it goes to executive, it doesn't mean that we have to hammer everything out in executive. If it's not solved by the time it's presented in executive, we can, at exec, we can send it back to this committee at that time. But at least at passing it at this time keeps the project moving. We still have options if we aren't satisfied at the executive. And we shouldn't, I think to your point, we shouldn't be hammering it out in executive. But if we say, yes, we want to go far, we do have some questions. But when it gets to executive, if those aren't solved at that point, we send it back to our, this committee. But if we don't pass it now, then we're delaying the whole thing. We won't get it to exec. Is that the way I understand it?
Mhm. Thank you, Madam Chair. If we move this forward to executive committee, I would like to know that Ivy and our engineering department, whoever needs to be involved in this project, works with the homeowners and our residents across the street. So they know exactly what's going to be proposed at exec, and that I think the county board members will be more comfortable voting for this.
That's a great
Agreed.
point.
That's agreed.
Also, just so you all are aware, for the executive meeting, we're planning to have a more detailed landscaping plan that will be demonstrating what the meaningful landscaping looks like, where it's going to be placed, what the cost is going to look like. So ideally by then, we'll be able to have a more set in stone landscaping plan. And also we'll have the cross-section imagery and options of what the elevation points look like. So we'll be able to demonstrate what the site looks like on paper.
Okay.
I have a parliamentary inquiry, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion on the floor at the moment?
I
No.
believe there is
No,
not.
there is
May
not.
I have a motion? Is that the,
Caius move.
Molina second.
now there's a motion
Or
on the
we're
floor.
done with the presentation, I guess.
All right. And the motion is to approve?
My motion would be to approve it with the stipulations that I think Ms. Woznicki,
Can we add that to your motion?
that we have.
I have a
that's
proposed amendment to the motion.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, what was, I'm sorry, I got a little distracted. So
So-
Caius?
I move that we move it forward with that we,
Ms. Woznicki's comments?
with Ms. Woznicki's comments about making sure that we are in contact with the residents in the area, and that our, whatever engineering and our staff is working on this so that it's finalized by the time it gets to
Good.
executive, so that we are not hashing it out in executive. Otherwise, we send it back here again.
Mr. Shepro, I think.
And we had a second on that.
Yeah, well,
Stefan second.
1 second.
Stefan second.
okay. That's a long motion. Jesus, sorry.
Got a
Need to
silence
show
on
you
that?
How to turn that off?
Yeah.
This is Madam
Okay,
Chairman again.
I would like to amend the motion, and the motion would state,
My goodness, Ken.
they're all selling health insurance. It's really annoying.
That Surges?
No, it's, I get 8 calls a day from all different numbers, and they all say, we are responding to your inquiry about health insurance.
That's why there's a silent button. on that.
Total fraud. I mean,
Silent
that's,
button.
anyway, that's, all right.
What's your?
I would suggest, I would like to move to amend the motion to say that it is forwarded to executive committee without taking a pro or con position, but subject to all of the questions and concerns that have been raised today. Well, that'll be my motion, to just forward it without a recommendation.
Wallace, second.
And if I could speak to that, again, we have a landscaping plan for executive committee. What are we going to do at executive committee? I hope we're not going to sit there and review a landscaping plan at executive committee. My concern is, and again, if we want to forward it with no recommendation, I guess that makes sense, but I also had a further question. So the waiting list that's been talked about, what is that exactly? Whose waiting list is that?
It's to become eligible for the money from the IPA, the Illinois Power Authority. When we did this 4 years ago, with the FEJA, Future Energy Jobs Act, 10 times as many projects signed up.
I understand that, but is this a waiting list that would be based upon the legislation that hasn't yet been passed?
Yeah, if I can help answer that. So the Illinois Power Authority that runs this, there was a hard deadline that the fee just sunsetted. So what the Illinois Power Authority has recommended to everybody in the state who's looking at solar, continue to submit your projects. We know that there's funding coming, and then once the funding is reapproved, it'll be first in, first out. So who's ever first in line gets funded, and so on. Who's ever in second line gets funded. So one of the worries is if you're way at the end of the line, the annual funding might be done for this year, might be done for next year. You might have to wait 3 years.
I'm just curious as to how they can have a waiting list for a project which has not even gotten legislative approval at this point, and then say that that has some validity, but that's a subject for another day, I guess.
Well, Wallace question. So is there a possibility to submit the project at this point in time?
I mean, theoretically you could, but I think there's way too many unanswered questions that really should be answered.
What's involved in submitting it?
You actually need a firm contract. You need to show site control.
They do require a contract to be in place.
Right. They're not just, the IPA isn't accepting every thought that I want to put a solar on a roof. They want real contracts in place with real plans, ComEd interconnect agreements. They have a pretty rigorous process in what they accept.
Okay, any more questions?
Just a thought. So how will our staff reach out to the residents across the street and work with them on, it's not just landscaping, it's fencing, it's, maybe a little more information. I know you've got Ivy valid information about there's no harmful health effects or negative effects from solar panels, but perhaps you could supply more information even about that.
Yeah. So that's something we've been talking about too behind the scenes. So I'm already in communication with many of the residents. Anybody new coming to the table to have a conversation about this, we're happy to speak with everyone. Like Mavis said earlier, we're going to set up a meeting to go out to the homeowners' porch and take a look. And then also we've been talking with GRNE to see if we can get a homeowners association presentation, which will have all that information on what the project site looks like, what it's going to look like from the view of their backyard, what kind of concerns do people normally have with this kind of project, and then how can we alleviate and address those.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, Mr. Iqbal, please go ahead.
Yes, I have heard this presentation, long presentation, and I have questions. As a background, I did my own solar design for my house and I backed out of it. I was getting the credit too. What we are being told would not be that rosy, let me tell you that. First of all, if you don't put it on the rooftop, don't do it. It's not worth putting landscaping and berming and going to a controversial site. County has a lot of buildings, they have a lot of roofs, and you can do it without any cost to landscaping and berming. And why it is not considered, I don't know. The second question I have is for the electric, energy company who is telling us that they will get tax credit. I'd like to know how much is the tax credit? Is it 110%? So they absorb, they get all the costs plus the profit, or is it less than 110%? And they are telling us that we will make saving from the day one. I'm not sure it will materialize. No, after paying the berming and everything. So those are my questions.
Repeat that, please. You're not sure about the savings because why? Oh,
I can, the one question on the tax credit is 26% for 2021 and 2022. It would most likely be built in 2022 in almost all likelihood. If it bleeds out to 2023, the tax credit goes down to 22%. And in 2024, the tax credit drops to 10%.
Thank you for those questions too. I can address the question about why this isn't going on a roof. So originally we did look at, originally we were thinking of looking at the multi-purpose building roof because that building was built to have solar on the roof. So that's where we looked first for this project. But there, when we got up to the roof, there were too many pieces of equipment on the roof to be able to contain all the solar panels that would be necessary to produce the 2 megawatt size of the system, and B, we would have issues with maintaining an array up there and any kind of issues that would potentially happen to the equipment, the HVAC equipment that is on the top of the roof, that we would run into issues with any kind of maintenance workers being able to work around the solar panels. So that specific site did not work for this project. And then speaking to the savings, we have all that information, I believe, available from the request for proposals that were submitted. So I can share that with you. But we received proposed estimated savings from all 8 solar proposals that we received back. So there is an estimated savings available for you to look at if you're interested.
so the estimated savings to the county would be $200,000 a year. And over the 25-year span of the contract, the estimated savings are approximately $5 million. So this has a very strong economic component as well as the environmental component of taking huge amounts of carbon emissions out of the atmosphere by not using electricity that comes from a fossil burning plant. So this has many benefits for the county and for the environment. Caius?
Yes, Caius speaking. I'd like to, if I can, bring us back to the amendment that Mr. Shepro offered to and was seconded by Mr. Wallace to send on without bias or
And a recommendation.
without a recommendation. Does that satisfy what our contractor requires to continue this on with the engineering? Because if we can't go to the engineering, it seems to me we're going to dead in the water.
Yeah, but
So
the executive committee is the first Wednesday of September. So
right, but if we send it with no recommendation, we need answers by that time. Are we still good?
Wallace, my thought on that would be that we're sending a resolution to the board, and whatever action the board takes on it, then it doesn't have to be consistent with the resolution.
No, but as it applies to what we have to, there's no point in sending us on if we can't get solutions, and we have to get the solutions from that company there.
From GR. Eric, can you respond to?
If we can't get it from them.
it has to go to the full board anyway, right?
For us,
I mean.
Let me,
you
can I
know,
restate this again?
Yeah.
And please go through the chair if you have other questions.
Sorry.
We need to send this to the head, and our company is going to do the engineering. If we send it the amendment without recommendation, is the company still willing to do the engineering so that when it does get to executive, it's something that's actionable?
Eric, is that good enough for you?
Yeah, I believe that's Mr. Caius that was speaking. I agree. We would want to see a favorable recommendation to keep the project moving forward. Otherwise, spending considerable amounts of money and time on this is challenging.
So that's speaking to the amendment. If we vote yes on the amendment, then we essentially kill it.
Well, that's obviously the decision of the SHPRO, the decision of the applicant. But I guess that my concern would be, well, first, I think Mr. Caius's premise is wrong. Sending it without a recommendation, it really doesn't matter legally. I mean, it's on the agenda for the executive committee. The fact that it comes from a committee with a favorable or an unfavorable recommendation doesn't have any legal effect on what the executive committee or the county board can do with that committee. It just means that the committee has been discharged of its jurisdiction and passed it on to the next level. And the alternative motion that would ask to be restated if the amendment is defeated, has a long list of qualifiers. And so I guess I'm not obviously the attorney for the applicant, but I guess I would say, what additional assurance do they feel they have if they got a favorable recommendation from the committee in light of the fact that all of these questions have been raised? Are we really going to have them all answered in 30 days? And if that's the case, if that's not the case, then it's going to add even longer to your timeline. And when executive says we got to send it back to have all these things from the landscape plan to the neighbors' concerns, I don't think we can really have an hour-plus discussion at executive committee where we're reviewing landscape plans and indemnity provisions and letters of credit. That I agree with Commissioner Winnicki that I think these things ought to be discussed in this committee. If there's concern about the timeline, then I suggest have a special meeting of this committee in 10 days and see if these questions are in fact addressed. And it's then not too late to forward it on to the September exec if the committee is satisfied. But everything I hear, just every time somebody talks, more questions seem to be raised.
Mr. Caius.
I agree, there are questions. Can we answer the questions without sending it on? Because if we don't get it past this committee, then our contractor is not willing to commit to do that.
Well,
But we still can stop it at any time after that.
Well, I think
Please go through the chair.
Sorry.
Pardon me?
It was correctly pointed out that I should be addressing my comments to the chair.
Yes.
Well, I mean, the committee can do whatever it wants, obviously. But if there is concern that you would like not only an affirmative response from the committee, but a meaningful affirmative response that doesn't have footnotes saying, well, of course, if we don't get answers, then we don't approve it effectively, which I think is the kind of what your motion says, Mr. Caius, even though it doesn't say it that way. Then I would go back to the idea of, well, then have another meeting of this committee limited to that, where those questions, we can find out if those questions have satisfactory answers. The neighbors could be aware of when that is if they want to come in and comment. I know people don't like having extra meetings, but I think that would be preferable to trying to engraft all of this onto the executive committee.
So Nikki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have faith in our staff. We have the best staff, I think, of any county in the state of Illinois. And when they say they're going to reach out to the homeowners and get everything finalized, and I'm sure if things were not finalized, you'd probably make our Madam Chair aware of that, of our committee and also of our Kane County Board. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. So I believe that the amendment that has been put forth by Mr. Chaperone, seconded by Mr. Wallace, will kill this project forever. I hope that we can move forward with the blessing of the neighbors to give this, to vote down this amendment and to move forward with a positive recommendation in the full faith and trust that we will keep working with the neighbors. We will keep working with GRNE. We have to give GRNE our faith and our support so that they know that they're working towards the engineering plan so that we can figure out how we can make this the most aesthetically pleasing plan, move the panels back as far as possible. There's no way we can ask GRNE to do that without our trust, without our support. So I'm getting ready to call the question on the amendment.
Can I call the question on the amendment, please?
Yes.
This is on the amendment.
Roll call on the amendment, please.
Which was,
Does everybody understand the amendment?
we repeat,
Can you repeat it?
you want to repeat it, Mr. Shepro?
I
Or, I'm
believe,
sorry,
yeah.
Madam Chair.
Or me? The amendment is to, okay.
Mr. Shepro moved to amend the motion forward to the executive without a recommendation, and Wallace seconded.
Thank you. Very nice. Roll call, please.
Roll call on the amendment. Allen?
Allen, no.
Caius?
This is to kill the amendment. No.
Yes, we are killing the.
Molina?
Sure.
Molina, no. Strathman?
Strathman, no.
Wallace?
Yes.
Wonicky?
No.
Bates?
No. Right? Okay, thanks. Mr. Caius.
The amendment failed, sorry.
Sorry. Then going back to passing it on and exploring your suggestion that we have an extra meeting, can we explore that further? If we do have an extra meeting with this committee, that would be, would include our staff, and so we, rather than passing it on to the
sure,
the exec, that we will, so we wouldn't pass it. My suggestion, we wouldn't pass it today, but we would suggest to the special meeting that we table it till we have a special
We
meeting. Is that
table it
correct?
to a special meeting if that were your.
And then,
is this a motion or a suggestion? I'm hoping it's a suggestion.
well, it's a suggestion for further discussion on that, because the motion is to pass it on to the committee or the exec. This is to explore the possibility of having another meeting.
I believe we can pass it today with recommendation and plan to have a meeting before the executive committee meeting, so that by the time it reaches the executive committee, we will have all the answers worked out, or most of them. I would like to pass this today with recommendation.
So that if I ask them to amend my motion to pass to executive, would be to pass it to executive, but no, it would be still be to pass it to another meeting. So maybe Mr. Shepro, or defer to another meeting.
Well, I'll defer to Mr. Wallace.
Wallace, I think procedurally, if you, and I don't want to speak in lieu of Mr. Shepard on procedural matters,
he'll correct you.
but
Don't worry.
I think procedurally, if we were to do that, we would have to defeat the motion on the table and then entertain a separate motion to table the item. Mr. Shepro, what do you think?
Well,
My belief would be, Shepro, is that if you pass it today, the committee is discharged of that issue. And so you could obviously have a special meeting to talk about anything you want to talk about, but you wouldn't really, it would already have been forwarded to exec. Is that a distinction without a difference? I don't know. I think procedurally though, if you really want to do it with the idea that you would be looking at additional plans or comments or detail on all the issues that have been raised, I think Mr. Caius's initial idea would be right, which is you would set a special meeting date and you would table the final vote on the motion to that special meeting. And then you could tweak whatever you did in light of what happened at the meeting.
I'm going to call on myself next, please. I believe that the vote that we just took, which said no to your previous amendment, shows that the spirit of the committee is to make this happen today. If we don't approve this today, it can still be sent back from exec. Is passing this with a recommendation today in no way exonerates my staff or myself or the rest of this committee from putting together good answers by the time it reaches exec. So we will have another meeting of this committee, probably a week before executive committee, whenever that is. And Ivy Clee, can you give me a date in your head? And so I would still urge this committee to vote this forward with recommendations, and we will work very hard to make this happen. I'm going to be on the Cameron's doorstep probably by noon today. Do you have any lemonade? No, I'm just kidding.
And vodka?
Okay, Mr. Caius.
I'd call for the question then, if you think it's,
Okay, so the motion now?
the original motion was to pass it.
The motion is approving a power purchase agreement and lease for solar energy with GRNE Solar Field 05, LLC. Please call the. Oh,
Well, we had some question. I was suggesting afterward that we put something else in there, but I don't know does that complicate things?
it's
Should we
very
just pass it
complicated.
Up to the people who are going to vote on the motion. I mean, whether they think it complicates it or not.
Yeah, because
It seemed to me that this is Shepro again. Seemed to me that the initial motion, as Mr. Caius made it, was not simply to pass it, but it was to incorporate a long list of things which should be addressed by the time it got to exec.
correct, yeah.
So,
Would you like to restate your motion?
well, if I could, I'm not sure what, can you take the
Without
motion?
me?
It was
Did you-
before the amendment.
What did you, I'm sorry. Which is, can you reread the initial motion? Does it have additional things other than what you have written down there? Because we.
There were, however, I think there were a lengthy comment that was, in my mind, part of the motion.
Right.
It wasn't just, I move we pass this.
Right. And if we can include those and make it logical, that's what I would do, which was Ms. Wojnicki had said that we would be in contact with the
Yes, that was the motion.
neighbors and
Yes,
with the
correct.
engineers to make sure that these are firmed up by the time it gets to exec.
Yes, Mr. Caius moved to move forward with Ms. Wojnicki's comments, which were the neighbors should know the answers.
To all these questions, yeah, perfect.
Madam Clerk, can you read that back to us? No, who should say it? Mr. Caius, it's your amendment now. Or I can read it from my notes if you
You
want
just
me
read it
to.
from your notes. I'll take it from that.
Okay. Mr. Caius moves that
I amend my motion to the,
amends
and the
the
second
motion.
was,
Strathman, seconds.
approve a power purchase agreement and lease for solar energy with GRNE Solar with, under the stipulation that the neighbors know answers to the questions that they have posed before the executive committee meeting on September something.
Works.
Pretty good?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Does that also include the landscape plan?
Everything,
Yep.
includes everything. Yeah.
Dates, black fence, South Berm, North Berm, landscaping. Those were your
Fencing
comments.
too.
Fencing, no, yeah,
Okay.
black fence or something. That the neighbors should know these answers before we go past exec.
Thank you.
Please call the roll. How you doing?
Allen,
Allen, I.
Caius,
Guys, yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Strathman,
Strathman, yes.
Wallace,
Wallace, aye.
Wonicky,
Yes.
Bates.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Mr. Shepro, for all your wisdom. Thank you, Mr. Wallace, for all your questions. Thank you, Ms. Wonicky, for your kindness. And Mr. Caius for everything else. And Ms. Strathman for hanging in there.
Causing trouble.
And my deepest apologies to Mr. Ford. Is this a world's record? I hope not.
I make a motion to put the reports on file.
Thank
I
you.
second that motion.
Okay.
We need a roll on that. Roll call. on-
Yes.
If you wanted to avoid it in the future, you could simply ask for unanimous consent to place the reports on
Okay.
file, and hearing no objection, so ordered.
All right, let's do it. Yes.
Please do what he said. All aye? Aye.
We have to vote if there's
You don't
no
have to
objection.
vote.
Oh, all
Yeah.
not in favor. Good.
Same thing for the
Right.
adjournment. To adjourn, I ask for unanimous consent to adjourn.
Unanimous consent to adjourn?
Aye.
Okay,
Don't even
thank
vote,
you
just
for
don't vote no.
everybody's hard
Technique.
work. And
Yes.
especially to our neighbors and our speakers and our